Hello and welcome back to Focus Atlanta. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about communicating with your kids. I know it seems like all they ever do is have their phones in their hands and they're looking down and they're texting, and that's how you get messages as well. But there's a better way to do it. I am here with Jocelyn Herman Sacchio. We're going to talk a little bit about communicating better with your kids. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, how often are you guys getting this question at Landmark? I mean, with parents and just really finding it difficult to even have real conversations anymore?
Well, you know, over 2.5 million people have done Landmark, and many of them are parents. Mm-hmm. So obviously, we deal with what's important to people, and their children are very important to them. So communicating with their kids is an issue that definitely most parents are dealing with, especially if you have, it doesn't really matter the age, but if you have teenage kids for sure, right? Yeah. So one of the things that we coach people in is how to listen, which, you know, sounds a little bit like, well, I'm listening. I mean, what do you mean how to listen? But listening is not a passive activity, as most of us would think. You know, a lot of times we're thinking in our heads what we're going to say. I know you would never do that, and nobody who's watching would ever do that, but there are people who are not really listening. They're listening to what they're saying about what the person's saying. So with your kids, one of the most important things is to really listen and to focus on what they're concerned about rather than what you're going to say when there's a space in the conversation.
Very good. And I think kids know when you're actively listening. They can tell when you've kind of tuned out and you're already on to the next subject or you're already on to the next thing. So it's important that they feel that as well.
Yeah, feeling listened to is not just important for children. If you think about it, it's important for all of us. Absolutely. And it's so rare we're really listened to. Yeah. So that's the first thing that we coach people in. And then the second piece that really makes a difference, especially with families, is to focus on their concerns and actually address them. So many times we sort of just dismiss their concerns like, oh, give me a break, or roll our eyes like, why are you worried about that? That's a silly thing to be worried about. I know my son, who's 12, he came home and he was very concerned about his school. He's like, I want to switch schools. I said, give me a break. You know, I said, give me a break. You're not switching schools, me, and I coach people in this, right? You do as I say, not as I do. So then in a moment, you know, like I caught myself and I said, okay, let me stop. And I said, well, what is your real concern about the school? And he told me a list of things that were really bothering him. So I listened to him and I said, okay, let's look at each concern and see what we could do to impact it, or maybe we will switch schools, I don't know. And he decided to form a group of students that were going to fix the things that were wrong with the school. One of the things that he was very concerned about was garbage on the stairs, and people were tripping on the garbage. I was like, I never would have even heard that if I had just shrugged off his concern like silly. So that's another thing that we really, you know, coach people in, is address people's concern. Their concerns are valid. Yeah. You know, for a 10-year-old, it is a valid concern, like, why can't I have that video game? Or for your 16-year-old, it's valid, why can't I take the car? So you got to listen to their questions and actually ask them questions.
Do people find themselves surprised when you're teaching these skills and they're like, oh my gosh, I do that all the time? Like, until you have that reflective moment, like, oh, I shrug off those issues, you know, every other day.
Well, it's so much the water we swim in that we don't even think about it. If you said to a fish, how's the water? They'd say, what water? You know, because it's just how we deal with people. And plus, we're so on automatic going through life. It's like, what do you need? What do you need? Let's go, let's go. And, you know, it's very rare that we spend a moment and just really get in another person's world, which is so important, especially with people that you love, you know. And then, yes, go ahead.
All right, so we want to listen, actively listen, and then we want to really address their concerns. Those are the first two, and number three, you were
the last one is kind of tough for people, but it's basically talk straight. And people don't talk straight to each other, and nevertheless, they don't talk straight to their kids either. And a lot of times, you know, they might be concerned about looking bad in front of their kids, or not having it all together, not having all the answers. That's a big thing for parents, you know, to seem like they have it all together. And, you know, I had somebody I was coaching in one of the programs at Landmark, and, you know, he was just going through a divorce. So he had a daughter who had just started college, and she wanted to go away for spring break, which is coming up, right? And with her friends, and he really couldn't afford it. But he didn't want to say that, and because he didn't want her to be concerned about money. So he kept saying, well, we'll see. Let's talk about it later. And the frustration kept building and building with his daughter.
He wasn't coming at her straight.
And finally, I mean, I got him in a program and I coached him. I said, you just got to be straight with her. And he did. And he explained to her what the financial situation was, which you wouldn't normally maybe say to your children. But she was 18. She was old enough to deal with it. And he said, listen, if you can keep it under this budget, I can pay for half of it. And if you want to get a part-time job to pay for the other half, we can partner on it. She decided not to even go.
Wow.
You know, so it's like creating a partnership with your children is so important and not an obvious thing to do because you think you have to be the one with all the answers. And,
wow. Well, now you've got to give Landmark's email or web address because people want to know, wait, can I take these classes? How do I do better? How can I fix this stuff?
So it's www.landmarkworldwide.com.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jessalyn,
you
for coming
so
in
much.
and sharing all this information with us. I mean, educating ourselves about how to better communicate seems like it should be, you know, at the top of the forefront of our minds. But again, we do everything so quickly, we're not always thinking about it. So sometimes you need to just stop, take a moment to think, and if you need a little help, check out Landmark. Thanks so much for tuning into this segment of Focus Atlanta. We'll be right back with more.